Hello, guys. Welcome to Rex Arthur Show. This is Rex Arthur, where we discuss LGBTQ issues with a humanistic approach and a LGBT perspective. And today we are not going to be in the shoes of Rex Arthur, but we're going to be in the shoes of Rivers of Thought, Lava of Fikir. Remember, we had to merge the channel, the philosophical channel. We merged it with Rex Arthur so that we could have at least ease of access and better way of managing than having two channels separately. And so today we are discussing what is really on my mind about things happening in the world, especially Africa. And this was a very hot week in Africa, especially Uganda and also Zimbabwe. And it has been a hot year for South Africa. And there is something happening in the youth population, and we want to discuss this. And we want to discuss in this light that the African political changes or revolutions or uprisings are basically rising because of this dynamic called what I'm calling the African youth dynamic. Africa, the world, as we are going, and we're basing our reasoning on the article from the World Bank, their data blog, and it says there's a chart we're going to look at that the world's youngest populations are in Africa. And this was done in 2016, and it's a very nice chart. I like what was discussed in it, so we're going to go through it. And the world's youngest populations are in Africa. Percentage of country populations under 20 years old in 2015. Very important. You've got to understand, these are people who are 20 years old in 2015. What it means, they were born in 1995. So these are all the young people who were born after 1995. And now, under past 1995 means that in 2035, around 2040, they will be 40 years old, these people. So this is a very important thing you need to see. Now let's look at the percentage. Now in America and most of Europe, but Germany looks very happy. Is it Germany? That looks like, no, that's France. France is 30%, even UK 30%. 30% of the population in UK and France are under 20 years old. Now, when you look at the most of Europe, 20% of the population is under 20 years old. So what does that mean? That means 80% of the populations in Europe are above 20 years old. And then now you come to Africa and South America. Now let's go to South America first. South America, 40% of the youth, or 30 to 40% of the population in South America is under 20 years old. And then when you come to Africa, 50 to 60% of the population is under 20 years old. Can you imagine? 60%. The deep green countries, which includes Congo, Zimbabwe, Angola, Tanzania, Uganda, and those ones look like Nigeria. And then you have You have what's north there. That's Guinea. Basically, West Africa is so green, and Central Africa is so green. We can't list all the countries, but they are 50 to 60%. Just think of that: 50% are under 20 years old. Unbelievable. 50, not even 30, 50. Half of the population of these African countries have people who are less than 20 years old. It's unbelievable. And of course, why is this unbelievable? It's unbelievable because, number one, this is a sign that the continent that has the highest level of potential human capital, not yet kinetic. There's kinetic human capital, the human capital that's being used presently. What Africa has potential human capital that if you are going to look for workers, they are going to come from Africa. Workers are not going to come from Europe because 20% of their population are less than 20 years old. So what does that mean? All the young people in Europe are going to get jobs. All the 20-year-olds are going to get jobs. There is nothing. But the sad thing happening in Europe is they are employing robotics. And robotics is putting people out of work. So what's going to happen is the 20-year-olds in Europe, even though they are few, they may not work, or thankfully they are few, so they will all get jobs. Now, but Africa is the issue, and is what we're going to be discussing about when we talk of Bobi Wine and Chamisa and Julius Malema. A third of the world's population is under 20 years old. This is what UN and World Bank are saying. But some countries are younger than others. In around 40 African countries, let's stress that word, over 50% the population is under 20. By contrast, in 30 richer countries, look at that, in 30 richer countries, less than 20% of the population is under 20. So what does this tell you? This tells you that rich countries, the current rich countries of today, have very small youth population. They have a very small youth population. And the poor countries, majority of them being in Africa, have very large youth population. So what does this mean? Economics rhymes with population. Rich countries tend to have fewer young people, and poorer countries tend to have more young people. That is the issue, and that's what we get from there. Now you have there are comments. People are commenting, so let's go through them before I go to the topic. You see, someone is thinking like me here. And he's saying, this is an opportunity for Africa and the global companies. 20s are the energetic, creative, and teach me more years. I agree with him. I remember when I was in my 20s, I was very energetic, very creative. I was learning, and those were the years, that was the decade I spent reading like a madman and doing things like a madman. I was very energetic. And that time I was in campus. I remember I was preaching and doing all of these things, and I was doing it with a lot of energy. I was reading a lot, and personally, that's how I used my energy. Some people use their energies differently. Some use it in sports and talent and singing. I used it more in academics. And what I'm trying to say is that even if it's diverse, we are all diverse. I mean, we all have diverse activities we do in our 20s, but the fact is, all of those diverse activities are, when they're done in your 20s, they are energetic, they are creative, and they are teach me more. You want to learn because you're hot-blooded, and it rhymes with the sexual maturity, because this is the age whereby now you want to engage in sex, because now you have matured in puberty, a few years of puberty, and then now you have your everything, your body organs are now active. You want to get involved in sex. So after that, now when you get into your 30s, you slow down a bit, for some people. So he's right. Now, this sounds good for the continent if it can tap into the potentials in its youth development. However, the youth must be empowered to deliver. The risk is that without empowerment for the youth, what the continent has in its hand, it's a time bomb. Very good. Bamidele Obamifemi. Obafemi Bamidele has said something very good. That if there's no youth empowerment, Africa is sitting on a time bomb. And this is what has happened in Uganda. And this is what is happening in Zimbabwe. And this is what's happening in South Africa. And is happening in almost every African country that has a youth population of over 50%. Why? Because as we've seen, when you have very many young people, you tend to be poor. Why? The economic resources are not enough to take care of the large population. So what happens is there's unrest because the young people don't have jobs. That means they don't have an income. That means they are poor. That means, and yet they're energetic and they are creative. So even you'll find crime levels in such countries, like petty crimes, like stealing and all of these things, they are many because the young people are jobless. The energetic people. You know, you'd rather have the old generation staying at home, but all the young people are working. That's better because the young people they are working at an energetic time and therefore can do a lot of work, and they can lift up the country. But you cannot depend on old people to build a country. This is what we need to tell these countries that are having unrest, political unrest, that the politicians who are old, and yes, we honor them, but they have to come to the realization that an old horse can never outrun a young horse. It's a fact. And, you know, they always say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. It's because the dog is old, it's tired. And not all old people, of course, are tired. There are some old people who are young at heart. But what we are trying to say is that majority of the old people, you cannot build a system that is based on old people. This is why Obafemi is right to say youth must be empowered. To tap into that potential they have, you must empower them. And how do you empower them? Number one, give them positions of leadership and give them economic opportunities like investments, like capital. You know, you have a youth system, a system of giving young people capital, whether it's an individual or groups. I know some countries do it with groups, but I am a supporter of giving young people, every young person, individual capital. And then that young person can either start a business on his own, or he can join his friends who have also received the capital from the government, and they pool that money together and they start a business on their own. So these are the things that African governments would be doing. That's how you empower people. What is power? You know, when you say you are empowering women and empowering the youth, what is power? Power is money. One form of power is money. Another form of power is authority, political authority, leadership. That is power, because you are making decisions. You are in control. So if you don't give young people money, you don't give them jobs, you don't give them authority, you are sitting on a time bomb, because they will come for you. Look what happened in Uganda. They were beaten mercilessly by the troops and the military. But they still went back on the streets. You see? And meanwhile, in Kenya, they showed support for Bobi Wine, which was a very good thing, because human rights must be the thing that governs young people. I'm happy that young people are now understanding human rights. No human should be subjected to torture of any kind because of anything. No human being should be violently mistreated because of standing for his freedoms and expression. So I think that is what I would say about Uganda and other countries. We're going to talk about these countries separately, because each situation is unique. Okay, let's go through. Okay, this is interesting and informative. Learning about how the world works is important for decision making and planning. Yes, thank you, Zoe. Zoe has submitted also there that it's very good to look. I like looking at maps also, because it makes me understand the world. Like the world, the future of the world, ceteris paribus, meaning if all factors remain constant, is going to be in Africa. It's a fact. The future of the world is going to be a black future. It's a black people's future. And because the young people are here, it has the highest number of young people. And you know, the advantage of having many young people is that even if some of them die early, because it can happen, the young people who die early, you have very many, there'll still be others, so you'll still go on strong. It's like a farm of goats. And the guy who has 1,000 goats and his neighbor has 100 goats, when there is rinderpest or a disease, beriberi, that gets the goats, the guy who has 100 goats, 60 of his goats get beriberi and they die. And he remains with how many? 40. Now, his neighbor who has 1,000 goats, when he loses also 60, how many does he remain with? He remains with 940. So, the guy who has more goats is still surviving, even though he made a loss, than the guy who had few goats. And so this is going to happen with the countries that also have few young people. When there's crisis or that needs young people, or when they lose young people, they will be at a greater loss than countries that have very many young people. And that's why we are saying the future will be in Africa. The future is in Africa. So if you're a wise investor, your eyes are focused in Africa. If you are a wise economic planner, your eyes are in Africa. Are you seeing? Look at Bill Gates. He funds malaria vaccine. Why? For Africa. He's building Africa. He is building Africa by helping reduce malaria. And because when you reduce malaria, what happens is the people stop dying, because malaria is a killer. It kills young people and old people. Now, enough of statistics. Let's now come to the last part of the video, discussing the importance of this African youth dynamic. What is it going to do to Africa politically? Number one, it is already changing the political dynamics of African countries. This is what has happened in Uganda. Case number one, Uganda. Uganda, 60% of the youth of the country's population are less than 20 years old. Now, the only good thing in Uganda is that people are still in school at that time. So what it means, they are not the ones involved in you won't find the children coming out of class and saying we also want to protest. But they are seeing what is happening. They are seeing what is happening. And in Uganda's case, because every country has a unique case, even if there are similar situations, like youth population being high is a similar principle. It's a common principle in all African countries, but they are unique differences. And in Uganda, the unique difference is that the young people, the Bobi Wine is a musician. He is a very is a musician, and now a musician turned politician. And before he was a politician, he was very successful. This is what the politicians in Uganda need to understand. This is a guy who had influence even without politics. He didn't need politics. He was already great. And he used his influential, what we call now, we're going to give it a name. We're going to give it something capital. Ingenious capital, meaning genius capital. He capitalized on his talent and converted it into political capital. That's what he did. And he's not the only one who did that in Uganda. There's also the gospel singer, Judith Babirye. She also used her fame in the gospel circles, music, and she converted it into political power. And she got into power because people liked what she was doing as a musician. And so when she said, "Now I want to be a politician," they said, "Yes, we'll support you because you make very nice music for us." And this is the same thing that happened to Bobi Wine. When Bobi Wine also now converted his musicianship into political capital, they would do that because sing about us and the country is beautiful. And so this is what he did. Now, the older politicians didn't do that. Museveni is not a musician. he fought. He was in the struggle of democracy in the 80s. And he did that. And so he didn't need music. He didn't use music to come to power. He used the force, the gun, as he said. And this is the same to Mnangagwa in Zimbabwe. He is Mugabe's friend. They were in the bush together. So Mnangagwa is in power not because he was a musician. He is in power because he fought in the bush. And then in South Africa, Julius Malema was young. He knew the struggle. And in fact, the best picture for African youth is to see Malema. Because Malema is young. Yes, he is. In his less than 40. He's young. And he saw Mandela. They knew Sharpeville massacre. They saw all of these things happening. But he was very young. He couldn't even have a voice. So Malema is like these 20-year-old children in class who are seeing what's happening in their country, like Uganda and Zimbabwe, and they are feeling like, oh no, what is happening to my country? You know, because young people, that's when they are very energetic. And so the Malema did that, and he joined the ANC. And he is not satisfied with ANC. And he left ANC and formed his own party, which again, when you look at the composition of the people in the party, these are young people. Malema has very many young people. Why? They were not empowered by ANC enough. If ANC empowered Malema very well and listened to his grievances, then, and solved his grievances, he wouldn't have left ANC. And the same also in Uganda. But however, you must understand, we are in democracies. Democracy means divergent views of political progress. We are not in monarchies. We are not in dictatorships. So what does this mean? That when people grow up, or when we are in parties, we tend to have divergent views about things. And it's normal. It will always happen. What Bobi Wine is doing is not new. It has happened even in Uganda. Kizza Besigye, the current opposition leader in Uganda, was with Museveni. But because they had divergent views about politics, he left Museveni. And it's very understandable. People cannot use, people used to use the history of Besigye and tell him, you used to be with Museveni, so why are you talking against him? No, it's normal. You can be in a political party and disagree with them and leave. That is politics. Politics is not rigid. You can live where you want. And so Besigye left because he had a different vision. And Museveni did not want to let go of his vision. Because if he lets go of his vision, then it means he's saying Besigye should lead. And he is saying, no, I still have a vision and it is what I want. So what you do is, when you see different visions, come out of that party. And Besigye came out of Museveni's camp. Malema came out of ANC. And Bobi Wine is not even in Museveni's camp. And he is having a view of the country. That's why he's come up as a leader. He has his view. And so, this is what happens in... Let's finish with Uganda. Now, Uganda, of course, is coming on the backdrop of... against the backdrop of Museveni increasing the term limits. And... removing term limits, actually, for himself, so that he can rule until the end, until he dies. Now, the problem I have with that... I used to give my opinion to Museveni on social media, thankfully. Social media allows us to talk to everybody. So we can talk to Museveni, we can talk to Trump. As I always tell you, we try to talk to Trump, not all the time. And my view was that Museveni needed a successor. Still having the term limits. He shouldn't have removed term limits. He should have kept them. And then put his person whom he wants, and he will be overseeing the country while he's alive until he dies, rather than stay in the office until death. Because that's what Mugabe did. Mugabe did that, and he didn't last. He even didn't die in office. He was tired. Why? It's physical, it's a fact. We grow old, and if you are not careful of your health, physical health, if you don't take care of yourself, and if you don't keep fit, you will reach 85 and you're tired. You can't even fight sleep. You're dozing. It's gone. Because you're not taking care of yourself. It's a fact. You'll reach 90. Look at Aretha Franklin. She has just died. And of course, for her case, it's not because of old age. She was sick. But you could see, when old people get sick, they die. When a young person gets sick, they can survive because they are still young. Their cells are very active. So, but when you're old, your cells are already dying. So if you get a sickness, you die. Look at Kofi Annan. It's a short illness that took him. But look at his age. He was 80. And that's a very ripe old age. So it's understandable that a short illness can take an old man away. It is a bit shocking if a young person is taken away, but it's not if the disease he has is very strong enough to take him out. Now, the next, so this is what is happening in Uganda. So now Museveni did that, and the moment he did that, he gave the opposition mileage to kind of now fight his party and what he stands for. But again, Museveni knows he has his own capital. We don't want to go so much deep into politics. We're just giving you the picture that's around. Look at Bobi Wine's age and look at Museveni's age. That is the problem in Uganda. Now, the age, so there's a generational conflict, Uganda. Let's go to case number 2, Zimbabwe. Chamisa is not even 50 years old. And he is fighting Mnangagwa. Now, of course, even if Mnangagwa won the election, he won it by 50%, which was dangerous, very dangerous win. He needed to have won with 70%, because when it's 50%, it means the country is divided. It's divided. And when it's divided, you are not able to do what? You're not able to support, to gain support when you have plans and policies as a country. So even though Mnangagwa is continuing, he's not gonna find it very nice. And he has to find, and because Chamisa is very young, so he has energy, he's boiling, and he's creative. He'll come up with ideas to try and disturb the government. Now look at Julius Malema and Ramaphosa. Ramaphosa is an elder, he's a senior man, senior citizen, and Julius Malema is not a senior citizen, he's young. So you see, he's causing a lot of headache for them. The only good thing you could say is that South Africa is very divergent in democracy. There is also the Mamane, the other DA, Democratic Alliance. So the opposition is diverse. So what does this mean as I conclude on the political part of everything? This means that a country should ensure that elections are proper, so that we can know which is the divergent view that people really want to have. That's what you need to understand. That's the best way to cool down the fires and the protests in Africa. It is that the young people also have to play like the old people and shape ideology rather than use ages to fight. Of course, what I mean by this is that because what we're having is not even an ideological battle. We're having a generational battle. This is about age. It is young people who are tired of old people. And the old people want to stay in power, but they don't want to empower the young people. You see? And one of the reasons why the old people may not be able to empower them, they don't even have the resources. You know, Africa is, the reason why we're looking at this map is to show you Africa is the poorest continent in the world in terms of people having per capita income, not per resources. Africa is the richest continent in the world, resource-wise. But per capita, meaning every person, income per person, it is the poorest. And yet it has the highest the youth population. So what does this mean? That if Africa doesn't watch it, its young population can die because of diseases, because of poverty. And then if not, even Africa can have incarceration rates that are very, like what is happening in America. America, the black Americans are the ones who are in jail. And they are being, I was watching something and I saw them being mistreated in the sense that they work in prison but without pay, which is slavery. So that's what's going to even happen in African countries. I mean, go to African prisons, they are full, overpopulated. And then outside the prison, young people are so many. So that means the chance of them committing crimes can be high. So you're going to overpopulate the prisons. Then you will need money to build more prisons. Oh, it is a very bad cocktail that is around the corner. And it's all because of the African youth dynamic. So now let's end on a positive note. What is the way forward for Africa? If the problem in Uganda is generational, if the problem in Zimbabwe is generational, because all of these countries, now look at the age 20. They were born 1995. Uganda, Museveni came to power in 86. So, what does that mean? everyone who was born after 86, everyone does not understand the struggle Uganda went through physically, has no clue about a bush war. Now, that population, as the years progress, is increasing. So what does this mean? Museveni's relevance is decreasing because his witnesses are becoming fewer. The people who witnessed the bush war and what happened in Uganda before Museveni was in power. Because the reason why Museveni is loved is there's a population that knows what happened to Uganda before he was in power. And they value him more than anything because of what they saw before he came to power. These are the people who lived during Amin's time. So they have history, they have memory. But the young people don't have memory. So even if you tell them that this happened, they'll tell you, but I don't know, what is even a bush? Are you saying bush meaning the shrubs? Because some children will just say, are they talking about shrubs when they say I was in the bush? And the shrub is just next to me here. What is that? You mean it was so easy? No, it wasn't that. It was much bigger. So all of those who were born before, after 86 have no clue. And therefore, as the years progress, Museveni is going to lose relevance. It's not his fault. It is fact of nature. People cannot, the witnesses are becoming fewer. And they will just look and say, oh, you're the one who fought. Okay. Wow, thank you so much. They will, their thank you is not as strong as the thank you of those who saw you do it. They really, they can thank you. They can even bow down and worship you because they know what they went through. They saw death at the door. So that is the thing that Museveni has to prepare himself for. That when he's going to leave power, people will just say, wow, by him. So I think he's prepared about that. He doesn't want to leave power. Full stop. That's the end of Uganda. Now we've finished Uganda. Now, Zimbabwe. The population that was born after 1980, when Zimbabwe got independence, that's when Mugabe finished his bush war, just like Museveni's bush war. They do not know, they have no physical understanding of the struggle Mugabe underwent to know for empathy. They can have emotional empathy, but it's not physical, it's not real. When you in the bush, they can just understand it that way and can only imagine, but they have no real experience of what happened. So the witnesses, Mugabe's witnesses, are dying off. They are dying. And the young people are becoming more. So they became more. That's why Mugabe left. He couldn't stay because he was looking for his witnesses, and they are too old to even come out in the street and support him. Too old. You know? And it's understandable. This thing, Mugabe's removal could not have happened in 1990. It couldn't. He was young, he was strong, he was in power, he was energetic. But it happened in 2018 because he's old. And they removed him very nicely. In fact, I like how Zimbabwe did it. They removed him very nicely. Just like an old man. Just told him, please, sir, I think you're tired. It's your bedtime. Just go and rest. And that's what they did. And he went quietly. And his witnesses are too few to fight with him. In fact, Zimbabwe, the young people were actually in support of Grace Mugabe. Why? She's young. She's young. She's not old. That's the whole thing. So this youth dynamic, young people are looking for leaders that look like them. That's what is happening. They are looking for leaders that look like them. They are energetic. They're hot ones. Not the cold ones, the hot ones. They're looking for them. Because when you're hot, you know, contrary to physics, physics says that like poles repel. I like physics for one thing. it's not saying like things repel. It's like poles, magnetic poles. In magneticism, like poles repel. But in friendship, like poles attract. You know, birds of the same feather flock together is the opposite of like poles repel. Because birds of the same feather will flock together. So if you're hot, you will look for someone who is hot and you will go with him. And this is what young people are doing. They are looking for leaders who are hot like them. And then they run with them. And you see, when you look at the pictures of the protests in Nairobi, they were young people and they are feeling good because they are standing for the young person. They didn't go there to stand for Museveni. Yes, in terms of Bobi Wine, even if he's of another country, because he's young like them, and he's also fighting for their cause like them. Like they are looking for a leader like that, or they have leaders like that. And then you come now, so Zimbabwe. So the same thing that's happening in Uganda is happening in Zimbabwe. The witnesses, the bush witnesses, are disappearing. And what does this mean? The relevance of the leader. If you are a bush leader, your relevance is decreasing because the majority of the population does not relate to what you went through. Even if you paid a price, they don't relate to it, sadly. So the best you could do, if it was me, I would give it to a young person whom I can talk to and give oversight, rather than insisting on sitting there and I can't connect with these young people. Now, that is Zimbabwe. Now let's go to South Africa and we finish our discussion. South Africa, Ramaphosa and is still in charge. And of course, what you need to know, even if you have an old person in power, it doesn't necessarily mean they can't rule. It's just that they need to empower young people to leadership positions. Like what we need to do is, even the statistics researchers and data collectors should go and do the research of the population, the youth population in parliament. How many young people are in parliament? How many young people are in government offices? You know, those are the things you need, that data. Because if it is not connecting, if it is that there are very few young people in parliament or in power structures or in government offices, then it means that there is a loophole. There is a big loophole, meaning that there is no connection. You don't know what the youth are doing and what they are thinking, and therefore you cannot make policies that affect them. Movement that has already succeeded in most of Africa, because now we have women MPs, we have women who are... It's because the women fought to be included, and they noticed that their issues were not being dealt with because majority of the leaders were men. So men couldn't and cannot understand a women's issues, like menstrual issues. Men cannot understand it, especially straight men, because when you are straight, you know, you are different in thinking from a gay man. A gay man, they are different. A gay man is not a straight man, you know, so they may be understanding, but a gay man is also still a man, so he may not fully understand a woman's things well. That's why a lesbian is easy. She's more in tune with women than any other man, because she's a woman. And so when it's menstrual issues, it will be women to fight for the ladies, because they know, like female circumcision, it is women who are fighting against it. And sadly, there are also women who support it. Yes, because they are the best. A woman who supports female circumcision is the best defender of female circumcision as a woman who is against female circumcision. those are the best fighters for it, because the woman who doesn't support female circumcision, she will give you all the reasons why it is bad. And the woman who doesn't support banning female circumcision will give you all the reasons why it's right. So let them fight. Let it be a women's battle. You see? That's what happens. And the same thing happens with men's issues. So when women came out and started advocating for their rights, that they need more women so that their policies and laws are made, and laws that affect them in their favor, they were brought into the house. Now it is youth empowerment that is on the agenda in most African countries. And so it is time for them for governments to realize that the youth, to deal with this youth time bomb and youth dynamic, you have to empower the youth. And not just empowerment in a small way, but in a very, even they could start, they can even start a youth MP. Yes, they can start a youth MP system. It's a fact. The youth are more than the old. 50%, less than 20. My goodness, you will have, and you have like 5 children in your house, you're dead. If you're an old person, you're dead, because they will do things beyond your understanding until they finish you. So you'd rather find a way of relating with them and connecting with them so that they can be included in development of the country. So that's enough of me discussing the African youth dynamic and about Bobi Wine, Chamisa, and Malema, and all the other African young leaders that are there. Of course, there are some African countries that have young presidents, which is why I'm saying it's very good to study the age. What is the average age of presidents in Africa? That's what we need to do. What's the average age of MPs in Africa? That's what you're supposed to do. What's the average age of workers in Africa? That's what you're supposed to do. So we need to be a very data-driven people. Africans need to be very data-driven, very, what do you call it? Knowledge-driven. We need to build a knowledge economy. Because when you have a knowledge economy, as this person who commented here said something very true. Learning about how the world works is important for decision making and planning. Yes. We are supposed to be planning every day. If you don't plan today, then you're in trouble, because there are things happening that you need to plan for, and you need to make decisions today. Every day we are making decisions. We are making decisions. And when you make a decision, they are based on reasons. What are reasons? Data. It's mental data. All of it. We are a data-driven world, even if you don't plan or make decisions. Data. Because guess what? Your body also makes decisions. When you're tired, it's also making a decision. I want to sleep. Yeah, I've worked for so long. Sorry, I can't do anything now. That's what happens. The body has an automatic system that works outside your control. You see, so sometimes nature does that to us, but because we are human beings, we know how to control our mechanisms. Anyway, that is my discussion on youth dynamic. You go and do research, please. Let's go and do research and see how many young people are in parliament, and the average age of the presidents and civil servants all over, and even investors. Businessmen. I know, look at the youth investors. Zuckerberg is a symbol of young people rising. Yes, the tech industry worldwide. There is no one who is 80 years old and is rich in the tech industry. None. Why? The tech industry is primarily a youth-based industry. All of the people who are there, majority of them, are in their 50s and below, or 40s. majority. Look at Twitter, look at Facebook, look at WhatsApp, look at Netflix. Oh my, they are young people. Google, you just look at them and you just say, wow, it's just young people. It's young people who are running the show right now in the world. And we have to, I mean, even look at England. I mean, when the Queen leaves power, people want even William to take over, not Charles. Why? Charles is old. I mean, his witnesses are also, but in England, they have the old population is more than the young, so they may forgive Charles, but they are really eager to see William as a king, because the world is being driven by young people right now. Anyway, I can talk about many things forever, and I think this one we have talked. Enjoy yourselves.